In this video, we're going to cover how you can rebuild confidence after a bad game in sports. Hey there, I'm Eli Straw, mental performance coach and the founder of SuccessStartsWithin.com. Let's imagine that there is a soccer player who just played a bad game. She made a lot of bad passes during the game, turned the ball over a lot. She had a couple shots on goal. They missed pretty badly, so she feels disappointed. And the worst part of it is the one goal that she missed, or the shot on goal that she missed, was later in the game. They were down by 1, so this would have been the tying goal. She had a pretty easy open shot, and she missed. So after the game, this soccer player is feeling really disappointed in herself, not only because she played below her potential, but because she made a critical mistake late in the game that she feels like cost her team the chance of winning. What can very easily happen is that leading into the next game, this soccer player could feel even less confidence, which would then lead to more fear and anxiety and lower play, which I'll talk about here in a second. This idea of playing poorly and then having that poor play lower your confidence is something that I see a lot in the athletes that I work with, and it's something we really need to be careful of. So why does this happen in the first place, though? Why does this poor game result in negative feelings and then lower confidence going into the next game? Well, with that soccer player, what is she doing after the game that's causing her confidence to drop so much? Well, I said a second ago that she feels like she's one of the reasons her team lost, especially since she missed that pretty easy open shot later in the game. So she feels like, hey, if I'd made that shot, that we would have had a chance of winning. Since I missed that shot, I'm one of the reasons that we lost. So she's going over and over her mistakes and that critical mistake after the game. The more that she reflects on those mistakes, the more she reflects and thinks about how poorly she played, and the more she beats herself up, the lower her confidence will drop. It's really the way you think after bad games that impacts your confidence the most. This is known as having negative self-talk after your bad games, or being too critical of yourself. Now, if you play a bad game, I'm never one that says you should just cover it up and tell yourself everything was fine if you played poorly. But we equally do not want to be too critical of ourselves, because we have to understand that after one game, we cannot go back and change that previous game, but everything that we think after that game is affecting either how confident or how scared we will play going into the next game. So now I want to fast forward to the next game for this soccer player. She's experiencing a lot of doubt. She's been too critical of herself throughout the week, and she keeps going back to that game and thinking about how she can't believe that she missed that shot and how frustrated she is in herself. When she gets to that next game, she experiences fear and worry about playing poorly again. Now, what do you think this fear and worry does to her actual level of play? Well, one of the main characteristics of playing with any sort of fear or anxiety is avoidance. Because she missed that critical shot late in the game, she goes into that next game and she does not call for the ball as much. She passes up open shots, simply because she is afraid once more of missing shots and feeling down on herself and letting her team down. So she passes up shots now. She's also playing it safe when she does get the ball. She's just making nice, safe passes. She might not make as many blatant mistakes during that game, but she's also holding herself back and not being effective. This is the main effect that we will see of having your confidence drop after a bad game or after playing poorly. Because if your confidence drops, you're not trusting yourself as much going into that next game. Because you aren't trusting yourself as much, it's easy for fear and worry to develop. When fear and worry develops going into that next game, this is where you'll hold yourself back, you'll play timidly, and you'll want to avoid the possibility of making mistakes. Now, this is a pattern that I see a lot, and it's a pattern that we have to make sure doesn't happen. And the way that we make sure this doesn't happen is by making your confidence higher after bad games. Now, this is not an easy thing to do at all, but it is a process that I've used with a lot of different athletes, and it's a process that I want you to start using for yourself. And it is a process. The reason that it is a process is because we are working on the way you think and evaluate the previous game what you do throughout the week between that game and the next game, and then most importantly, what you are thinking and what you're doing to build confidence going into your next game. Now, that building confidence part is key for us because we know naturally confidence will drop after a bad game. There are very little athletes out there who truly have confidence that is stable. All of us have our confidence going up and down. And when we play really well, naturally we feel more confident going into the next game. If we play poorly, naturally our confidence will drop. When we know that confidence naturally drops after poor performances, we have to work extra hard to build confidence going into the next game. And remember, the reason that we need to build that confidence isn't just so that we can play confidently. It's more about getting back to playing your normal way so that you're not playing with fear and anxiety, holding yourself back, and playing to avoid mistakes. So this is a 4-part process that I want to walk you through that helps you go from playing a bad game to being able to have confidence going into your next game. And the first part of this is how we evaluate that previous game. So with that soccer player example that I gave earlier, I said that after the game, she's going through and she is beating herself up and she's being critical of the mistakes that she made. Her self-talk is focused on how she let her team down. Now, the truth is, and this can be a harsh truth, but the truth is, she did make the mistake at the end of the game of missing that shot. Now, just because she made that mistake doesn't mean she needs to beat herself up, but we know that that mistake is there. Just like if you play another sport and you've had a bad game, and especially if you've made a mistake late in the game, we cannot pretend like that mistake didn't happen. So whenever we are evaluating games, we don't want to try to pretend like the mistakes didn't happen. The reason we never want to pretend like they didn't happen is because now we're trying to convince ourselves of something that's not true. So always in the back of our mind, that thought's going to come back where it says, I made a mistake. I did play badly. I can't feel good about this game. We have to recognize that we did make that mistake. But once again, that does not mean that we need to beat ourselves up. So with that soccer player example, what she would want to do is that after she finished the game, maybe she would want to forget about it for that day. Because the rest of the day, she's likely to just feel absolutely disappointed in herself. So she might want to forget about it and actually do her evaluation the next day. And that's something that I do suggest to a lot of the athletes that I work with. If you have a really bad game, you want to evaluate it in a productive way, but you need to give yourself time, right? You might not need to do it right after the game or even that night. So do something to forget about it. Hang out with your friends, hang out with family, watch a funny movie, do something to take your mind off of the bad performance. But whenever it is time to evaluate the game, now we need to do so in a very objective way. The way that we evaluate games in an objective way is by answering 2 simple questions. What did I do well? And then what can I learn and what can I improve upon from that day, right? So for her, for the soccer player, she would need to look at what she did well. This is the most difficult question, because if you played poorly, just as she did, you're not likely going to just easily identify positives from the performance. But we have to, and they're always there. No matter how badly you played, there is something that you did well. You want to try to identify that and write it down first. Then we'll move on to the next step. The next step is, what can I learn or what can I improve upon from the game? When she thinks back, she might say that she needs to work on her shooting. Okay, so that's what she would then work on during the week. She might also say that she needs to work on her passes or her decision making. The goal with this second question is to gain something positive from the mistakes that you made. Because remember how I said earlier, we don't want to just brush over mistakes. We don't want to pretend like they didn't happen. Well, if we're not going to pretend like mistakes didn't happen, we have to do something positive with those mistakes. What we do positive with those mistakes is we learn from them, and then most importantly, we work on what we need to work on to help us improve based on those mistakes. So she would then say, okay, I need to work on my shooting and I need to work on quicker decisions with my passing. So then those become her goals for the week. Now, this brings me to the second part of this strategy. The second part of this strategy is you want to focus on improving during the week, not being perfect. What that means is you want to take practices for what they are. They are opportunities for you to get better as an athlete. They do not need to be judgments every single day of whether or not you are perfect. Now, when you have a bad game, it's easy to go into practice and think, I need to practice perfectly in order to build my confidence for the next game. Because I'm coming off of a bad experience in terms of the results of my game, I might feel like I need to have just incredible practices to rebuild that confidence. But when you try to play perfectly in practice, number one, you inhibit growth because you aren't focused on what you need to be focused on in order to improve. But you also give yourself way too many chances of getting down on yourself again and beating yourself up, because the likelihood is you're not going to practice perfectly, because nobody practices perfectly, and that's the point. You have to make mistakes during practice in order to keep improving. You have to push yourself. You have to test yourself. So what you want to focus on throughout the week, and when I say week, I'm talking about the days you have between games, is that you want to focus on improving. So going back to that soccer player example, she knows that she wants to work on her shooting and her passes. Well, that's what she wants to try to improve every single day during practice. She does not need to be perfect and make every shot she takes. She doesn't need to make perfect passes, but she does need to focus on these and work on them. What this starts to do when you honestly focus on improving, and especially improving upon those smaller areas of your game during practice, is that it takes your focus away from the result, right? Away from the outcome, and it puts it on the improvement process. So now you are giving yourself the opportunity to get better each and every day. And as you start to get better, or you feel like you are improving, that confidence will slowly start to come back. But remember, we have to be very careful here not to try to be perfect in practice, but simply focus on improving during practice. Part 3 of this strategy is where you want to visualize throughout the week. So during practice right now, you're working to improve. You're focusing on the small areas of your game. Specifically, you are focusing on improving those areas in which you made mistakes during the last game. But while you're doing that, we also want to start building the memory of success. So why is it, do you think, that after good games, you feel so confident moving forward? Number one is you just had a good game, right? So you're thinking, oh, okay, I can do that again. But it's really the memory of that good game that impacts your confidence going into the next game. And we can call that the memory of success. It's the same reason why if you have a string of really good practices in a row, you will feel more confident going into your next game. Now, if you are coming off of a bad game, we know that naturally you do not have that memory of success from that previous game. In fact, you have the memory of failure. If you continue to think about the memory of failure, that's where we see your confidence drop. And that's why a lot of athletes struggle with confidence after bad games, because they are still thinking about the failure. Then they start to fear that failure going into the next game. What we want to do is build a memory of success, and we can use visualization to do this. So throughout the week, as you are practicing, you want to spend about 5 minutes or so every single day visualizing yourself succeeding. I would suggest you visualize yourself succeeding during games, not just during practice. But you can do this visualization before practice, or you can do it in the morning or before you go to bed at night. But if you are wanting to rebuild confidence after a bad game, it is critical that you give yourself the opportunity to be successful. And you have to give yourself that opportunity in your mind. You have to see success in your head, and we will use visualization to do so. So make sure you're using this visualization every single day. Now, the last part of this strategy, part 4, is where we focus on our self-talk going into the next game. So if we back up for a second and we take an overview look or approach of this whole strategy so far, we have the first part of the strategy, which is evaluating your game. So you want to evaluate the previous game in a productive way. The second part of the strategy is where you are focusing on your practices. You are improving, not trying to be perfect during practice. Part 3 is where we are working throughout the week to rebuild the memory of success through visualization. Now we've come to how you are approaching the next game. Now, earlier I said that when you experience a bad game, it's easy to feel fear and anxiety going into your next game. That fear and anxiety will be caused by and will create fearful and anxious thoughts. These might look like, I hope I don't have another bad game. I can't play poorly today. I hope I don't mess up. Thoughts like that. We have to be sure that you are having confident building thoughts as you go into the game. And there are a couple different ways that I suggest you do this. Number 1 is you can create what's known as a self-talk routine, where you review simple statements going into the game as a way to feed your mind positive and confident thoughts. You would then reread this list right before the game begins. Number 2 is that you can focus on reframing. So this is where we understand that you'll naturally have negative thoughts. We all naturally have negative thoughts, but especially coming off of a bad game, you'll have a lot of negative thoughts and a lot of fearful and anxious thoughts. You recognize that you'll have those thoughts, then you pay attention to them. And when you notice yourself having one of these thoughts, you work on reframing it or changing it into a better thought in the moment. So the example would look like this. If I'm thinking, I hope I don't play poorly today, I would recognize that, then I would reframe it into, I've been practicing well all week, I know I can go out there and play well today. That simple change is going to take me from playing with fear to playing more with trust and confidence. And when we then look at your actual physical performance during the game, one of the key factors that we want to pay attention to is, are you playing to avoid mistakes or are you playing to succeed? If you're playing with fear and anxiety because you played poorly in your last game, you will play to avoid mistakes. Whenever you play to avoid mistakes, you will underperform. If you play to succeed, you are playing with trust and you are confident in yourself and your skills. We need that to be the way you play going into your next game. Because the truth is, nothing will rebuild your confidence faster than playing well. Everything that I've talked about up to this point is to help put you in a position to play your best in that next game. That doesn't guarantee that you'll play your best in your next game, but it at least gives you a better chance. A better chance than if you play with fear and anxiety because you played poorly in your last game. So if you have a poor game or if you have a bad game, what you want to do is make sure that you evaluate that game in a positive and productive way right after it. Then you want to make sure that throughout the week you are focused on improving, not being perfect during practice. Then throughout the week you also want to be using visualization. And lastly, you want to pay attention to your self-talk, the way you are thinking going into the next game, to be sure that you are thinking in a confident and positive way. If you're interested in learning more about one-on-one mental performance coaching or any of the sports psychology programs that I have available, I've put links to those in the description below, or you can head over to successstartswithin.com to learn more. Thank you for watching the video, and I wish you the best of success in all that you do.